Nigeria's landmark Petroleum Industry Act, once celebrated as a breakthrough reform, is now back on the operating table. President Bola Tinubu has approved a draft amendment that would tilt control of the oil sector away from the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, towards the Ministry of Finance Incorporated and a more powerful upstream regulator, NUPRC. While supporters frame the changes as a bid to curb fiscal leakages and tighten oversight, the amendments, however, raise fundamental questions about governance, strategy, and the future balance of power in Africa's largest oil producer. To unpack this, I am joined by Femi Oladehin, Managing Director, Argentil Capital Partners. Thank you so much, Mr. Oladehin, for joining me today.
Good morning. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Right. Now, what do you make of the idea of amending the PIA, and would you have recommended any of the proposed, amendments to start with?
So look, we always felt that the PIA was an act that, we wasted quite a lot of time in coming up with this law. If you recall, probably the first discussions around an amendment of Nigeria's petroleum laws happened probably about 15, 16 years ago, and before we had it passed into law under the last National Assembly. The biggest concern everyone has right now is that some of the changes being proposed in these amendments actually beg a belief. It's almost like we're trying to solve one problem by creating a problem we solved with the initial PIA. And that confusion is just one that I'm hoping that in the process of continuous engagement, the government would see a different direction that is possible for this law. It is quite scary, some of the things that are being proposed. If you recall, prior to the PIA, the NNPC was the judge, jury, and defendants, and everything, accuser in the entire industry. They wielded unbelievable power. The PIA whittled down some of that power, turned it into a limited liability company with limited regulatory powers, and transferred some of those regulatory powers to the NUPRC and the DPRA. And to now start to contemplate an unwinding of that structure to the detriment of, obviously, what was improved corporate governance, improved direction for the market, is just scary. I still don't understand what they're thinking.
Does that sort of look like government's intention is to politicize things and, to bring things back under its own control? Or what exactly, or how can we view this? That's on the one hand, but then just because we're pressed for time, I want us to also look at the change in ownership structure. I mean, that particular portion reads, ownership of all shares in NNPCL shall be vested in the Federation at incorporation and held by the Ministry of Finance Incorporated as the sole bearer agent of the Federation. I mean, what does that mean in practice, and what is the implication?
Look, I mean, I think I actually have less concerns about the ownership. The Ministry of Finance Incorporated has been an institution that has been created in the last 5 to 10 years and has been able to deliver value. So shareholder ownership today, it's 50% owned by MOFI and 50% owned by MOPI, which is the Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated. The truth is that ownership really doesn't really do much, especially when it comes to a government institution like that. Perhaps you also remember that part of the plans post the PIA was a potential sell down of government ownership in the NNPC. But the bigger issue here is that the Ministry of Finance Incorporated is the institution best structured to own and to hold government-owned companies. And that's something that has evolved over the last few years and has been working effectively. So I really don't have much of a problem with that. But the bigger issue, and I don't want us to skirt around it, is that this transfer of ownership of PSCs and JVs and all of that to NUPRC is a major disaster waiting to happen. You are literally saying to us again that what we've just walked away from, where the regulator was an active competitor and player in the market, is exactly where you're taking us back to. And that just beggars belief. What exactly are they hoping to achieve that was achieved under the NNPC and we're just literally trying to replicate that. So I would say I'll pay less attention to the structure of the ownership. The federal government still controls the institution that's called NNPC through the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. But the bigger issues are how are the operational and regulatory environments going to be improved by this PIA. And from what we see, there's likely to be significant pushback from the industry.
All right. Now, NUPRC sort of seems to be the biggest beneficiary of this amendment. Is it the case that, when you profit from the little given to you, more will be assigned to you? Now, specifically, I know you've pointed this out, but I just want to put it out there clearly. The NUPRC will act as the government representative in all model contracts attached to licenses and leases, replace NNPCL as concessionaire in all subsisting production sharing contracts, profit sharing contracts, including risk reserve contracts. It's also expected to evaluate, approve all relevant work programs, verify and approve all contractor costs to determine cost recoverable expenditure under this contract. Just like you said, that looks like a departure from the original PIA, which sort of separated these functions. What do you see? Do you think that with the pushback we're beginning to have, the government might want to listen? Or, how do you read all of this, really?
Look, it's very difficult to see positive in this move. It's extremely difficult. I've thought through it multiple ways, and it's just completely impossible to see positive in it. You're literally saying to us that someone whose job and responsibility is to regulate an industry has now become a player in the industry and has become a competitor to the rest of the market. And then obviously, with all the ubiquitous powers to approve contracts, to verify, to ensure that the fiscal side of things is controlled by the federal government. That is a scary world in which we can wake up in, where you have this super majority regulator, and that person is the one who's driving the policy direction, driving the negotiation of contracts, driving the approval of contracts, driving cost recoveries and all of those things within the industry. We're literally just setting ourselves up for a lack of investment, which is how we got here in the first place. So don't forget, the reason why today we're struggling to reach the 2 million barrel mark is simply because we wasted so much time on trying to form and formulate the original PIA that, major oil companies refused to invest. And that destroyed infrastructure, ensured that we lost significant production, and we're literally trying to recover to the point where we were just before COVID. To then come again and effectively just unbundle everything that has been done, that the industry is trying to get some level of comfort and understanding around, you're literally just going to push out investments further down the line. And that would only be destructive to the industry and Nigeria's dreams of fiscal freedom from increased oil production. So I would say that what the federal government should be focusing on is effectively ensuring that all of the structures that we have in place today are actively pursuing the goals that the federal government has set for them. And once that is done, then leave the industry to invest and recover the production we've lost. But these constant changes, policy flip-flops, they're never good for investors and they're never good for investment.
Maybe I should just sound as a devil's advocate here. They tell us that these amendments sort of get towards, curbing leakages. Don't you see anything around that? Maybe it could solve it one way or the other. And how bad are these leakages we're even talking about?
So, of course, there are leakages, but you're actually handing, I have to be careful how this comes out. You're literally handing leakage from one hand, from your left hand to your right hand. The leakage is not going to change, except to tell me that the people who are working in the NUPRC are not Nigerians or people with experience from NNPC in the first place or from the DPR in the first place. So look, the truth is that you can't, the monk, as they say, the robe doesn't make the monk, right? You can't expect that just because you've changed the person who is doing something without fundamentally changing the industry structure, that the results are going to be different. And that's something the Nigerian government is very good at doing, renaming companies or renaming organizations and expecting their performances to improve. That's not the way this works. How a performance improves is by ensuring that the governance structures around these organizations are optimized for the benefit of the people. So I'm saying to us that cosmetic changes are not going to work. What you're looking for is, if there are leakages in the NNPC, then tighten your governance. If there are leakages in the industry, tighten your governance. Ensure that you are putting the right people in place to be the runners of these organizations. Ensure that there is accountability where people have failed to deliver on a consistent basis. That is how other climates or other countries that have developed an effective system work. We're trying to reinvent the wheel, and our results are unlikely to change because the end game is going to be the same.
All right, Dr. Oladehin. Mr. Oladehin, maybe I'm prophesying anyway.
Well, yeah, soon.
Okay, great. All right, we'll go to a very short commercial break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation. Stay with us. And of course, we're still looking at the proposed amendments to the PIA, and joining me on that is Femi Oladehin, Managing Director, Argentil Capital Partners. Thank you so much, Mr. Oladehin, for staying with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So, can we link these changes to the controversy that has sort of marred the NNPC and its chief executive in recent times?
Look, I'm not sure that there's a direct line. Nobody changes policy because of an individual. I think that would be foolhardy on the part of government. But one thing that is clear and obvious is that obviously there is some level of leakage that having the NNPC as the ubiquitous institution that it is, be the only player in the market that's representing the government's interest. So we understand that. The bigger issue here is that as you try to solve a problem, I'm saying don't create a bigger one. That down the line you're going to have to actually then try and find another solution for. What we should be doing, again, I'm saying, is improve the corporate governance around the NNPC, tighten the contracting structure, the contracting cycles around each of these organizations, get the owners of the company, which is the MOFI and MOPI, to play a more active role in managerial oversight, in just strategic direction for the company and holding its managers accountable. That is how private companies, the banks that we all invest in, and all of the companies listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, that is how governance works. The shareholders are the ones who hold management accountable. You don't hold management accountable by law. You hold management accountable through just very clear, reporting lines, clear regulatory structures, and clear accountability. That's really where we should be focusing our attention on.
All right, thank you so much. Before we close, I just want to get your thought on, the goings on, talking about the downstream sector, maybe the midstream sector, the Dapman, Dangote, Petran, depots not, functioning as they used to as a result of Dangote's strategy and all. Where do you see all of this taking us to at the end of the day? Let's close on that.
It's just laughable. For those who have been in that industry for the past 10 years since Dangote started building his refinery, it's actually ridiculous that they did not expect that there will be seismic changes in the industry structure. We've been talking about this and telling our clients that the market is going to change, and it's going to change dramatically. And so you have to pivot accordingly. Dangote has come into the market, the biggest supplier literally on the southern hemisphere. And you expect that business is just used to go on as usual. Of course, that's not going to happen. There's going to be disruptions in the market. And Dangote is also going to want to maximize his profitability by ensuring that he brings in operational efficiencies that the market is not used to and people are going to be excited to pay for. So look, I think that all of these bodies are literally there for their own selfish interests. They don't care about the average Nigerian. They only care about their own pockets. As long as Dangote is able to consistently and sustainably deliver production to the market, ensure cost efficiency, ensure that we're able to, compete with the rest of the world, I honestly don't care much about these other guys. Like I said to you at the last show, I think they're just trying to continue to eat their cake. The party has moved. There's no cheese in Station N anymore. They should pivot their businesses into other things.
So where does this leave the government and NNPC really?
I mean, look, NNPC is a player in the market. The government should just ensure that the regulators play their role so that Dangote doesn't become, a single player in the market. What we should be doing is encouraging investments in that space. And that's what we talked about at the top end of the show, which is that stop changing policies, stop changing rules every time, because people can't plan. People want to be able to make strategic decisions for the long term. If you keep changing the rules, then you are allowing disorderliness within an industry. So what I'm saying again is this: look, create an environment where anyone can invest in the Nigerian oil and gas space. Create an environment where, people are able to put their money in, and if the policies are right, and if they make the right strategic decisions, they're able to make money. Then we get to see a country that's growing, and we can sustain the growth that we're experiencing.
Thank you so much, Femi Oladehin, Managing Director, Argentil Capital Partners, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show today.